Hello racing fans, this is NASCAR Racing Fan 2015 back, and it is finally time to review the inaugural NASCAR Cup Series race at the Charlotte Roval. And it's time to analyze whether this race will go down in NASCAR history or whether it will become a meme for crashes and gimmicks for decades and be revered by many NASCAR fans. When the 2018 schedule was unveiled in May of 2017, there were tons of changes, including a round of 16 overhaul and the Brickyard 400 moving to early September. No changes were more eye-catching, however, than the fall Charlotte race. Not only would the race move up a weekend to the end of September and act as the round of 16 cutoff race, it would have a new track configuration. Instead of utilizing the traditional 1.5-mile oval, the race would feature a mixture of the oval and the renovated road course layout, later labeled as the Roval. The course itself was rather interesting and was labeled as a challenging track on paper. Unlike previous Charlotte races, NASCAR drivers would make left and right turns in the infield of the racetrack and come back onto the oval configuration heading into turn 1 and onto the backstretch. Located towards turn 3, however, was a brand new bus stop chicane for drivers to maneuver around, and heading past turns 3 and 4 on the oval, one other element was added to the road course layout. A portion of the infield grass was paved over to represent an S-style obstacle before drivers would complete a lap. This was later one of the keys behind the Roval's success. So when this news broke out, I felt that the Roval was a positive move for the sport of NASCAR. One of the biggest issues NASCAR has created lies in the schedule, especially the lack of road courses. Comparing NASCAR to other racing leagues, IndyCar and F1, they are heavily outnumbered on the amount of right turns and road configurations on the schedule. In addition, it was a great placeholder move before the 5-year track sanction agreement ends, since the sport found it a genius idea to lock down race dates through 2021. This was a stellar move by Marcus Smith and everyone at SMI to change a track configuration, to add some flavor to the 36-race schedule and add a road course into the playoffs. So before a lap was even turned on the Roval, this was already considered a positive move for the sport of NASCAR and its future. With all the announcements out of the way, it was time to hit the track. During the summer test and the practice sessions before the race, the Roval had the words wreckfest written all over it, as it was going to be a matter of survival and mental skill in order to win and perform well at the Roval. For the most part, the infield section seemed fairly tame for the most part. Just a few spins and fender benders here and there. The most challenging part of the course for the NASCAR drivers, however, was the backstretch chicane. Denny Hamlin, Eric Jones, and Bubba Wallace had issues maneuvering past the bus stop and ultimately took hard impacts into the added barriers. As a result, NASCAR modified the wall in order to create more breathing room for that corner. Some other issues occurred with the S's right before the start-finish line, as Brad Keselowski, he took a hard hit into the outside wall and created more drama and anticipation for the race. So with that all said, however, it's time to get the show on the road. Enough about the hype. Let's go racing. The first race run on the Roval was the NASCAR Xfinity Series Blue Cross Blue Shield 200, which marked the second race in the round of 12 for the Xfinity playoffs. In a surprising turn of events, this race was not a total wreckfest. Besides a pile-up during Stage 3, as well as Austin Cindric running out of talent once again, it was fairly tame and collected. We saw some solid racing, tons of playoff drama, and the finish rewarded Chase Briscoe as he earned his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series win. While the race could have been much longer, I think it was a solid start, a solid backbone for the Charlotte Roval to have, and it ultimately built up to the Cup Series race. Now it's on to the main event, the Bank of America Roval 400. To put it in simple terms, this was a great race. The racing for the most part was decent, as we had some great battles for position and some side-by-side action. In addition, we only had a small dosage of gimmicks such as the stop and go rule, as well as Chris Buescher testing out a possible concept for the Generation 7. For the first time in a while, we had some pit strategies such as Alex Bowman, Ryan Blaney, and Clint Boyer pitting early while others were trying to conserve for the end. We had tons and tons of playoff drama all throughout the race, as unlike most elimination races, the cutoff line got shuffled around during multiple stages in the race, and it produced a point scenario that has been lost the entire season. And finally, we got a great finish, one that will get talked about for years. Jimmy Johnson, a 7-time champion in the NASCAR Cup Series, decided to risk his championship hopes to win the race and break his 51-race winless streak. As a result, he spins out in the S's and collects MTJ, and it allows Ryan Blaney to steal his second career victory. The only issue I had with this event relied on the NASCAR on NBCSN commentating team. If you took a shot every time Rick Allen said, "The Tums heartburn turn," during the broadcast, you would likely end up in a coma or in a poor health condition.
Pile up and the Tums heartburn turn. Caution coming out again.
Absolutely terrible job once again by the NBCSN race team, as besides the broadcast, however, the Charlotte Roval was such a fantastic race to watch. Not a single issue with the course itself, the racing, or any of the enhanced rules for this particular event. It was easily the best NASCAR race of the 2018 season, and quite possibly one of the greatest races of all time. After a highly successful inaugural Bank of America Roval 400, it's time to look into the future. Should NASCAR add more Rovals to the schedule? Honestly, I think it wouldn't hurt to add a few more Rovals to the schedule, as two tracks stand out as possible expansions for this idea. The first track that needs a Roval event would be the Spring Texas race, as ever since the 2017 repave, the track has been a one-groove racetrack and has produced some awful racing. In fact, the finish to the 2018 spring race was so bad that Samantha Bush's facial expressions were more exciting than the battle for the lead. Absolutely no way for Kevin Harvick to catch Kyle Busch for the race lead, except to race in his very tire tracks. It was absolutely pathetic. And while the track would need to undergo renovations, I think a road course event could work at Texas. After all, you have IndyCar racing at the Circuit of Americas the weekend before in 2019, and adding a Roval event to Texas would make NASCAR interesting once again for Texas race fans and help fill the stands for one of the largest markets the series goes to. The second track is hands down Pocono Raceway, as ever since day one, the racing in the Pocono Mountains has been lackluster. The only thing that makes this race exciting are the insane crashes this fast, high-paced racetrack produces. Adding the road course section for the June Pocono race could actually make this race an enjoyable event instead of a 3-hour parade, an absolute snooze fest that we've gotten over the last couple decades. Thank goodness the track president at Pocono Raceway has talked about possibly adding the Roval. And in fact, I would endorse going to Pocono twice a year if we had one race on the Tricky Triangle and then the other race on the road course layout. I mean, we all know that Pocono is a big market. It's near Pennsylvania, cities like Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. That's the closest they get to NASCAR action. And we need to go to the Pocono Mountains more than likely twice a year. And one way that we can improve it would be to add a Roval event to the Pocono Mountains. While we could use some more Roval events, we don't need a monopoly of them. After all, remember the last race that was an eye-catcher for Charlotte Motor Speedway? It was the 1992 NASCAR All-Star Race under the lights on a 1.5-mile oval. Known as the One Hot Night, it produced a great finish, and it put NASCAR on the map in terms of popularity. Shortly after that event, however, Las Vegas, Texas, Chicagoland, Kansas, Kentucky, and Atlanta were formed and built into that same shape. And in the 21st century, most of them are now terrible racetracks that generate very little excitement from time to time. The last thing we need to do is kill the novelty of the event. A good 2 to 3 Rovals should be the direction NASCAR goes with this, but do not go any further than that limit. So the bottom line, the Charlotte Roval is here to stay, and it has officially become a staple on the NASCAR schedule. This was certainly a chaotic race, but it was far from the wreckfest everybody predicted from the beginning. And honestly, this is a plus for NASCAR, as not every race needs crashes upon crashes to draw in new race fans. All the series needs are some late race incidents and some drama to invest in, much like what we saw last weekend. And believe it or not, this was the first race in possibly 2 to 3 years I found myself invested into. Just so many circumstances and storylines to follow along with, as well as the great unknowns of a new racetrack configuration. These types of races will get NASCAR back on track and grow in the 21st century. An absolutely fantastic race, and I can't wait to see what the Roval configuration can bring us next year. So anyways, this is NASCAR Racing Fan 2015 signing out, and just remember, life's a beach and then you drive.